Sometimes sports is funny. Sometimes sports can basically give you a purpose and all of that. As I'm trying to find the purpose of putting my book away. The fact of the matter is that certain cities lose teams and then it takes them a while to get back. One specific name comes to mind is that when you are a fan of the Brooklyn Dodgers, as you were before 1958 when they moved to Los Angeles, the fact that, the Dodgers were part of Brooklyn. I mean, they didn't have a football team to hang on. They didn't have a basketball team or a hockey team to hang on to. Well, they kind of did have a hockey team for one season in the 40s, but that was it. But everyone in Brooklyn loved the Dodgers, and the Dodgers were close by. Unfortunately, Brooklyn got dilapidated, and the Dodgers didn't want to play in Ebbets Field and didn't get their stadium, so they moved to Los Angeles. But when a city like Brooklyn gets a basketball team and a hockey team, then you know that sports are back in Brooklyn, although the hockey team is back kind of on Long Island. So, anyway, let's talk about the 2014 Brooklyn Nets and my personal hatred of them. We're playing basketball sims. We're playing basketball sims. He's playing what if NBA? Cutter's doing what if NBA? Yeah. Oh, all the teams around the world got to know that the Raptors are number one. But what about the Bulls, Wizards, and Pistons? They all have great what ifs. Stories about old teams like the Kansas City Kings and maybe even the Minneapolis Lakers. But we all know we're going to do some basketball. He's doing basketball. He's doing basketball. What if? Cutter's doing what if NBA? So what if NBA? So anyhow, the Nets franchise didn't start off life in Brooklyn. They started life in New Jersey. I'm going to be brief with my stuff, like give you Cliff's notes, due to the fact that, I already have a New Jersey Nets what if coming up soon. But anyhow, the Nets started off in New Jersey. They were the New York Nets in the ABA, the American Basketball Association. Basically, the league used to try to compete directly with the NBA, kind of like the NHL had the World Hockey Association compete with them, and the NFL had the AFL with them. Baseball almost did too. But the fact of the matter for the ABA is that they were trying their best to compete. They had 3-point shots, they had slam dunks allowable, and they had the red, white, and blue ball. The Nets alongside the Spurs, the Pacers, and for the life of me, Spurs, Pacers, and I'm probably going to get crap from those fans if I remember the 458 team. I said Spurs, I said Pacers, I said Nets. Oh, the Nuggets, of course. All got absorbed into the NBA. Unfortunately, the Nets would have to play in New Jersey because they would have had to give a massive indemnity thing to the New York Knicks, like for $6 million, but they couldn't do it. The New York Nets were so poor, they needed the money for the expansion fee, so they had to trade Dr. J away to Philadelphia for the money to support themselves. Anyway, so the Nets played, they went to a few finals as the New Jersey Nets, and then in 2013 they decided to move to Brooklyn, which was weird and all that. They would be basically trying to compete against the the Knicks in a way. So anyway, there are a lot of things going on and all that. The Nets have massive rivalries with the Celtics and the Knicks. And of course, they did have a rivalry with the Toronto Raptors, mostly because Vince Carter actually got traded to the Nets and, started a lot of things going, all that. So anyhow, Brooklyn were a decent team and all that. They have been on and off. They tried their big three: Rajon Rondo, Paul Pierce, and Kevin Durant, but to no success. Brooklyn playing at the Barclays Center, which the New York Islanders did for a few years themselves before hating it and moving back to the Coliseum on Long Island. Nevertheless, Brooklyn's been around for a while and they haven't done too badly. So let's take a look at the Brooklyn Nets and their one of the most successful seasons in history. So the 2014 Brooklyn Nets. This was the second season playing in Brooklyn after moving from New Jersey. The 47th year of the franchise, 38th in the NBA because they played the first 9 years in the ABA. The Nets made a massive offseason. They hired Jason Kidd as head coach, who played with the New Jersey Nets for 8 years and helped them get to 2 NBA finals. They got rid of Gerald Wallace, who will forever be the greatest Charlotte Bobcats player of all time. Chris Humphries, the guy who was married to Kim Kardashian for 40 days. And 3 draft picks to the Celtics, all for the want of Kevin Garnett, who was big for Boston after being traded from Minnesota to Boston, and then KG winning the championship in his first full year in the Celtics in 2008. Anything's possible. Oh my God. And, they got him and Paul Pierce, who will always be a Boston legend. And of course, Paul Pierce got fired from ESPN because he was having some stupid COVID parties. Jason Terry was also added to the Nets from the Celtics. The Nets would have the highest payroll in the NBA and high expectations. Unfortunately for Brooklyn, Paul Pierce only played that one season with them and signed with the Wizards. Mason Plumlee was the only draft pick by the Nets. So anyway, the Nets were 5-12 after January, and by April they actually swept the Heat in a 4-game season sweep, in a regular season sweep. And it was weird because Miami had the big three of Bosh, LeBron, and Wade. The Nets turned into the 6th seed with 44 wins. So if you look at the standings, the Raptors won the division by 4 over the Nets. That's when the Raptors finally started to be good. And the Raptors were the 3 seed. They beat the Bulls in a tiebreak mostly because they won the division. Brooklyn lost a tiebreak with Washington for the 5 seed. So Washington would play Chicago, Brooklyn would play Toronto, Charlotte would play Miami, and Atlanta, 6 games below 500. They beat the Knicks in the Turtle Derby to face the Pacers. So a lot of people did say Brooklyn tanked to make sure they faced the Raptors and all that. 6 versus 3. So in the playoffs, they had to face the Raptors. Game 1 started off auspiciously awful for the Raptors, as MASAI UJIRI, who was the GM of the team, was was doing a fan rally at Maple Leaf Square, and he said these words: "Fuck Brooklyn." The Nets would win Game 1. The Raptors would win Game 2, and then had to win Game 4. So the Nets were up 2-1. They lost Game 5, and it looked like the Raptors were going to go to New Jersey. Go to Brooklyn, win Game 6, and get rid of the spirits of playoff series past, like the ghost of playoff series, because the Raptors only had one playoff series victory at that time. But the Nets won, and then in a Game 7, which was seen by a lot of people on ABC because ABC decided to make it national for the Americans. Kyle Lowry had a great shot, but Paul Pierce blocked it, and the Nets were going to go on to the second round, pissing me off in the process, obviously. The Nets were going to meet the Heat, and it looked like the Nets were going to take down the Heat. Now, of course, in the NBA, unlike the NHL and MLB, they don't reseed their teams and all that. Well, the NFL also does that too. So practically, they were going to meet the winner of the Heat and Hawks. No, sorry, the Heat and Pacers. Nevertheless, the Nets got their butts handed to them in game 5. They lost on a game-tying shot, and their season was over. So yeah, it was just amazing what could happen. Yeah, they won game 3 against Miami, but they couldn't do anything. Here's a tail twitch. Well, anyway, they were not too happy. They did have a decent roster. Alan Anderson, Andre Blatch from high school, Jason Collins from Stanford wearing 98. Why? Kevin Garnett, the legend. I was, why wasn't he wearing number 5 or 21 on that squad? That would have been cool. Yeah, the guy who was drafted 5th in 95. Jorge Gutierrez, Joe Johnson from Arkansas. Sweet! Andre Kirilenko, former Jazz icon. Sean Livingston, former Clipper icon. Brooke Lopez, great player. Paul Pierce, who they pilfered off Boston. Mason Plumlee, who they drafted from Duke. Marcus Teague, Mirza Teletovic from Bosnia. Marcus Fulton, and Darren Williams from Illinois. And that was a huge pick, a huge trade and all that to get Garnett, Pierce, Terry, and DJ White. They traded away Reggie Evans and Jason Terry to Sacramento for the one of Marcus Fulton. So yeah, they got rid of some players. Joe Johnson was named NBA All-Star, so that was good. So yeah, the Nets and all that. But let's throw Brooklyn a bone. What if they did get to the conference finals? All right, so the Brooklyn Nets, after losing, well, what if they beat Miami, the team they swept in the regular season? Well, then they would face the Indiana Pacers, who were hoping to get themselves to what their second NBA Finals. But anyway, the Pacers with 56 wins take on the 44-win Brooklyn Nets. Let's see what would happen. Game 1 would see the Pacers beat the Nets by 9 in a battle of ABA teams. David West, 22 points. So you see Pierce, Johnson, Plumlee, Williams, and Garnett. With Andre Blatch, 12 points in 20 minutes. There's Mirza Teletovic and Marcus Fulton, Jason Collins. The Pacers, led by David West, Lance Stevenson, the Kissing Bandit, Paul George, PG-13, George Hill, and Roy Hibbert, who I wish the Raptors would take. Evan Turner, Lee Scola, CJ Watson, and Ian Mahimi are your minutes guys, eaters. So they only use 9 players. Do we? Do we? Game 2 would see an overtime heroics by the Pacers. George Hill with 25 points. Paul Pierce would have 19 points in 33 minutes. Blanche, 11 in 22 minutes. There's Karolinko with 2 minutes. There's a Teletovic. 27 from West, 25 from George Hill. And, they shortened their bench. Mahimi had 13 minutes on the floor. Not one fucking point. On to game 3, where it would be the Pacers winning at home. Mason Plumlee. Yeah, that's we went at home. Mason Plumlee, 19 points, 13 rebounds. Finally deciding to come alive. 22 from PG-13. Hibbert with 19. Still with a 4-man bench. And had more than 9 players. They had to have. 22 from Joe Johnson. Game 4 would see the Pacers lose again in Brooklyn as Mason Plumlee did another job. So Brooklyn forces at least a game 6. Stevenson and West both had 21. Scola had 13. Yeah, 25 from Darren Williams, 22 from Mason Plumlee in 32 minutes of action. Blanche went 16 points in 21 minutes off the bench. For the Nets, Game 5 would see the Nets actually win the game in overtime, 107-95. Joe Johnson stepped it up. Well, he was a hog, so Joey Johnson and Paul Pierce. 10 points from Andre Blanche off the bench. Reggie Evans had 6 points off the bench in 6 minutes. 24 from Paul George. Ian Mahimi, 20 minutes. 20 minutes. 3 blocks, nothing else. Anyway, Indiana versus Brooklyn. Game 6, Brooklyn went home and won 101-93. Garnett remembered who the heck he was and beat the Pacers. So the Pacers would have had a 2-0 series lead. Brooklyn winning the big Game 5 on the road. Paul George, 22 points. Danny Granger. Where the heck was he? But yeah, Texas icon. 24 points for Pierce. Another guy I wish the Raptors would take was Danny Granger. 13 from Andre Blatch. So with that, the Nets would be going to the finals. Now, if I can remember who the 2014 team was. It was the Spurs, right? Yeah, it was the Spurs who were the 2014 champions to face Miami, right? Because Kawhi got revenge, in a sense. 2015 was when Golden State started to come forward. Yeah. The 62-win San Antonio Spurs is next. So the Nets would play another former ABA squad. Game 1 would see the Nets buck the trend and beat the Spurs thanks to Mason Plumlee's 22 points. So Brooklyn would have won Game 1 on the road. 22 from Plumlee. Darren Williams only had 3 points in 30 minutes, but it didn't matter. They used the whole bench. Allen Anderson, Brook Lopez, Tyshawn Taylor, Tomiki Shanika, Marcus Teague, and Andre Kirilenko got to see some time. The Spurs, 20 points from Tim Duncan, forever Spur. Kawhi Leonard, who the Raptors would take 5 years later in a trade for DeMar DeRozan. Tony Parker, another Spurs icon. Danny Green, who also was on the Raptors team in 2019. Diego Splitter. And then on the bench, Manu Ginobili, 10 points in 23 minutes on the bench. Too bad he couldn't play forward. I would have made him a player. Danny Green. Boris Diaw, Marco Bellinelli, former Raptor. Jeff Ayers, Matt Bonner, the Red Rocket, former Raptor. Corey Joseph, Canadian. Patty Mills from Australia. Oi, oi. Damian James, Austin Day, Nando DiColo, Shannon Brown, and Aaron Baines. Different time. Game 2 of the finals would see Brooklyn lose 102-92 and end their 5-game winning streak. Duncan with a triple-double with 10 assists. Mason Plumlee only scored 2 points off the 2 points in 30 minutes. 2. Andre Blanche scored 18 off the bench. Marcus Thornton scored 10 off the bench. Talatovic scored 4 points, and Allen Anderson had 3. Those guys had more points than Mason. Splitter had 14 points. The high point total was Ginobili off the bench with 16. Kawhi, Tony, and Green all had single digits. It's like, how the hell did they win the game? Waitershed has happened. Game 3 would be the Spurs crushing Brooklyn in Brooklyn. Tim Duncan, yay. 19 points for Duncan, 19 for Green. Manu, 20 points in 24 minutes. Morris Diaw, 8 points in 20 minutes. Marco Bellinelli, 9 points. Brooklyn, Darren Williams, 18 points. Joe Johnson, 16. Blatch, Livingston, Talatovic, a lot of points. So too was Allen Anderson. Game 4 would see the Nets beat the Spurs thanks to Darren Williams' 16 points. So Brooklyn ties San Antonio 2-2. Now, back in 2014, the NBA Finals was a 2-3-2 affair, which means that Game 5 will be in Brooklyn. 11 points by Parker and Duncan. That was the high mark? Austin Day scored 11 points in 4 minutes. Everyone in the Nets scored double digits. Talatovic scored 12. So anyway, Game 5 would see the Spurs lose to the Nets 99-97. So Brooklyn with KG put up 12 points, 15 rebounds. Yeah, KG was a KG guy. So Brooklyn forces a Game 6 and 7 in San Antonio. Ginobili 17 points off the bench. Let this guy some help. 23 points from Joe Johnson. Darren Williams 13 points. Blatch 12 points off the bench. Paul Pierce 6 points. My question is, where do you put him? You can't put. You could. I guess you could put him at shooting guard. That's what I'm probably gonna do. San Antonio's like, this guy needs to come on off the bench, and it worked. 103-94. Duncan remembered who the heck he was and forced a Game 7. 22 from Joe Johnson. And then 19 from Ginobili in 25 minutes. Splitter 15. Kawhi only had 4 points. Only 4. You're playing Game 7. Is it going to be San Antonio's time? The answer is you knew it. You knew that was going to happen as Kawhi put us up 19 points. And Brooklyn was going to go in with one win, and San Antonio needed it. But they couldn't do it. They couldn't beat the Spurs, and the Spurs would have won the 2014 title just like in real life. Plus 11 points. Yeah, Pierce scored 10 and then would leave for Washington. Ginobili would put up 16 points in 22 minutes. All right, 19 from Kawhi, 17 from Parker. The Spurs win in Game 7, take down the Brooklyn Nets. And you know what? Fuck Brooklyn. That's all I have to say. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond to do.